Jack, congratulations on the film. You must be so proud of it. Your first film as a director and as a writer as well. What made you want to move from in front of the camera to behind it?
Oh, I think just a love of this. I love film so much. It's like it's so deeply ingrained in my heart and my soul. It's my first love without question. I can't sort of go about a day without thinking about something, an idea, whatever it is that sort of influences in a day. I sort of my wife and kids always sort of laugh about that, saying that's how you think. You think about life is movies for you. It's just always been that way. So I just wanted the first one to be something that I didn't want to make. I had to make. I had to do it. Like with every ounce of my being, I just needed. I had to make this movie.
But it sounds like it was inevitable. It was just a question of when rather than if.
Yes, exactly. Well, and I've been sort of writing for a long time and sort of playing around with ideas, and I had some different things in production and stuff, but never as a director. This was much more just on the other side. This was the first time where I pictured every cut, every character, every edit, every, piece of this movie from the soundtrack to the actors to whatever it was all or nothing, all or nothing.
So, does making the film mean that this is going to be a change of direction for you in your career? I mean, do you see yourself as, say, mixing acting with directing and writing?
I probably mix the two. I loved the directing, writing so much that I'm incredibly eager to do it again. And I always think the sooner the better. I think sometimes people wait too long between those films, and you've got to. Sorry to be a horrible name dropper, but Ridley Scott, who has been a huge supporter of this film, he actually. I only say it because it was probably the greatest comment I ever got. But he said he put it as his favorite film of the last year. But he said the most important thing is go and get another one get going on the next one as soon as possible. Don't wait. Don't wait around. Like people spend far too long getting into their second film. So I've been desperately trying to try and find that next movie, which, there's a few little irons in the fire. So we'll see, we'll see, we'll see.
Yeah,
But
you're not going
I
to
will absolutely still act.
yeah, you are not going to ignore advice from somebody like him, are you? Let's face it. No.
Never. And he was he was great. He was a source of such sound advice. I don't think I could have made the film. I made the film in 20 days. And I had a day and a half on the fight scene alone. And if it wasn't for Ridley's advice, I don't think I would have been able to do a lot of that. He's just such a wonderful and brilliant filmmaker, but also a great support. So I've been very lucky with some of the wonderful filmmakers who've come out for this one.
So, how much would you say that your experience as an actor influences your directing style, particularly when you're working with your cast?
I've loved being an actor because I love actors. I love the process. I also love that, and I'm very sympathetic and I understand that every actor is his or her own person. They have their own process. And I think that language um, has is very helpful to sort of have such a deep understanding of it that this film is nothing if not for the actors. It is a character study through and through. My grandfather made the very strong point that 90% of making a film is casting. If you have the right cast, it sort of all falls into place. There's really something to that. And I obviously wrote every word of this for Michael, and the film hinges on that. If I didn't have Michael, I don't think I would have made the movie. I couldn't have imagined it. So I think there's a beautiful shorthand that I am lucky enough to have developed from being an actor for such a long time. And also just that absolute sort of reverence of standing back and really witnessing somebody, allow somebody to bring themselves to the film. I said when the character's yours, when the part's yours, it's you now. I don't have an ego in that sense. I love the collaboration. I think I enjoy more than anything when people are coming to you with thoughts and ideas, and I sort of liken it to a thoroughbred. It's like them at the starting gates, you know? It's when you open the gates, let them run. Don't get in the way. Don't get in the way. Let them run. And, you know, you've cast it, you've given them the part, allow them to exist and play and feel free. And that's the beauty of this job. It's like be surprised, enjoy the surprises because, you know, it's honest and it's truth and it's startling and it's magic, man. Sometimes you just find the magic and it's beautiful.
Well, I think you found the magic in, well, certainly in Michael in the lead, but also you've got a cluster of amazing names like Steve Buscemi and Ron
Yeah,
Perlman and John Magaro and Joe Pesci, of course, all playing small
yeah.
roles, but really pivotal roles as well. What made you take that approach?
When I started sort of like coming up with the idea for the film, my favorite movies, specifically growing up, the films that really moved me were always quite simple in story. There was usually a single element that gave them the complexities that, you know, sort of drew us to it or made it a great story to tell. And in this case, you know, the simplicity of it is it's, you know, it's a prize fighter, a disgraced prize fighter on the day of his first boxing match since leaving prison. But the fly in the ointment is, well, what if he was the only one who knew that this might be his last day, and he's probably going to die in the ring? Um, what would you do if you only had one day? Who would you see? What would you say to them? Um, and that made every single person who Mikey meets integral and important. Every one of those actors realized that it wasn't the size of the part. They were all the most important people in this man's life. So they were all integral in telling the story. And I think that's, you know, the great saying, there's no small parts, there's only small actors. No, you know, no truer words have ever been spoken because the film doesn't work without any one of those people. And they all understood that. And every single performance that's given, even in a very short amount of time, I find some of the most powerful work these guys have ever done. I mean, like they have stood behind this movie and been so supportive and they've loved it so much because it's it's what you sort of work your life for. It's like getting involved in something where you actually really have passion. And every one of those incredible actors, and you know, the discovery of wonderful Nicolette Robinson too, who's just phenomenal in the movie, and you know, breaks your heart. But everybody was just they came to work with such glee. I Everybody had a great time making the film because they actually were doing what they loved, and it was refreshing.
And Joe Pesci, I think, came out of retirement for this one.
He did. He was unbelievable at what he did. I say, you know, people who don't know it, the reason I cast Joe, of course, one of the greatest actors who's ever lived, but what a lot of people don't know is he's a wonderful musician and singer. And when I heard him sing, that's what gave me the idea for the character, because my gran, when she was suffering from early onset dementia, she would listen to music and it would bring her back in the room. And then I heard Joe's voice and him sing. And what people won't realize is that's him singing on that record. That's Joe's voice. And that's the sort of unbelievable, amazing thing that nobody knew is he's one of the great singers. So when they put the record on in the home, that's why I wrote the part for Joe, because of his voice.
So there was no plan B then. I mean, what would you have done if he'd have said no?
I really don't know, because I did literally write it with the two people who were started with Joe and Michael. Obviously, I just couldn't imagine making it without them. Thank God they said yes, so I don't need to know what it feels like without them saying no. But I can only imagine there wouldn't be a film. I can only imagine.
Let's not go
Yeah,
there. Let's not
yeah.
go there. There's a
Let's not
very
go there. Exactly. I can't imagine it. I might be living an alternate reality right now. I don't know.
there's a really um classic feel to the film. I think part of that's down to the black and white photography, even though it's not as, say, grainy as you would have had in the 50s or 60s. Now, you'll probably tell me if I'm barking up the wrong tree here, but watching it, I actually felt that Michael's character was what Terry Malloy in On the Waterfront would have potentially been, because Mikey wasn't a contender. He was actually a champion.
By the way, it's what an amazing sort of comparison, because I'd say On the Waterfront was one of the most influential films of my life. It was one of my grandfather John's three favorite movies. He loved that film. And you don't know where influences come from and what they do to you, but you're absolutely right. It's like Mikey was given the opportunity and did it, and maybe in his eyes or other people's eyes squandered that opportunity. That's why he's given this. He's actually given a shot again, a final shot. Whereas Terry Malloy was never given that shot, and sort of placed as the stool pigeon and all the rest of it and goes against them. But it's a really interesting way of looking at that. And I have to say, I think Michael gives a Brando-esque performance in this film. I think he's on par with, he's tapping into something so profound that, if people want to go and see an actor really do
Yeah.
what they were born to do. This is a tour de force, unlike anything. The amount of people who said, if the world was right and it wasn't so much about money anymore, and his name was Brad Pitt, he'd probably have an Oscar in his hand for that performance. But
Yeah.
sadly, the world isn't necessarily a fair place. But
There are times in the film, and particularly at the beginning, when the dialogue is actually very sparse. I mean, I think the first 10 minutes, there's hardly a word spoken at all.
yeah.
I wondered why you went for that approach, and also the challenges that it brought to you as a writer.
I wanted us to it's a very good question, because I said, if you can fall in love with him before he's even left his apartment, in essence, if we can witness him in this sort of purgatory state where he's living without color, without life, and you can feel his soul as he's stepping out into the world. I said, if you can exist with him in the first 10 minutes, you'll be with him to the end.
Mm.
So if you can do that in the beginning, if you can somehow create this sort of bubble around him, this like saintly-esque bubble around him, where we witness that he's in this world, he's on this struggle, there's something. And I said there's two very important parts about that for that beginning, which is we're introduced to his injury. We see how he is with animals. and we see his love for his daughter, so a child.
Yeah,
And they're three very innocent acts, in essence. They're making every one of those shows his vulnerability and his sensitivity. And I said, he's a boxer, but you have to show his vulnerable side straight off the bat. You have to see him in his most raw form. And that is literally naked, showing this and
yeah.
expressing it to an audience. I think that's a very surefire way to show somebody who has done at their most vulnerable in their most vulnerable state and the truth of what's in their heart, because he's not showing it for anybody else but himself. We're seeing him exist within the confines of those four walls of his apartment.
And you mentioned your grandfather, John, earlier. And of
Yeah.
course, he made what should we say was a boxing movie. I wouldn't call Day of the Fight a boxing movie, but obviously he did, which was Fat City. I wondered if there were any
Yeah.
elements in Fat City that you maybe incorporated into your film, because I felt there was a similarity in tone, but yours is a more positive film. Fat City is actually, to me anyway, really quite bleak.
A very bleak. I hadn't, and this is an amazing one. So I haven't seen Fat City since I was, I think, 11 years old. I was such a young kid when my dad played me Fat City. I was so young, maybe even younger. And I purposefully didn't rewatch anything. But that's not to say it wouldn't have made some sort of mark on me. And I always think to myself, it's like speaking to any artist or any filmmaker or any writer. We are a combination of what we're made up of. Influences hit us at all times. I don't even know where they come from at certain moments or what part of the brain. And maybe something did leave a mark, or maybe something did do something to me. And it's so funny because it's, we are, what are we if we're not a sort of culmination of all of the influences of our entire life? It's sort of the beauty of it, especially as a filmmaker and speaking to people like Marty and and Ridley. And these guys are insatiable about what they watch and their sort of absolute history of film and love and passion, almost like a student that will never sort of be fulfilled. It's like to always be a student of film, I think, is the best possible way, because it keeps you fresh and it keeps you open. It makes you vulnerable. So I think there probably is a drop of Fat City, but there could equally be a drop of The Elephant Man in there. There could equally be a drop of this in there, which films that you wouldn't even know were comparative. So it's so funny how those things sort of take up your life. I kind of love that there might be a little piece of that in there too. It makes me feel very happy, especially as that was so bleak. Like mine is all about love and forward.
Yeah.
I always want someone to be. It's heartbreakingly beautiful. I think the movie. That's what I wanted to make, is something that stays with you and is in the pit of your stomach. And Irish Mike now takes up a piece of your heart. I wanted it to be something very moving, which that hopefully we accomplish.
Oh, I think so. Jack, it's been lovely to talk to you. Really appreciate your time. And thanks for such a
Oh,
great film
you
as
too,
well.
Frida. What a pleasure.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
you're so kind.
Really
Thank you for your
easy.
support. It means so much to me. Thank you, dear.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.